Yes. So I just wanted to review a little bit from last week about the books of the Bible to make sure in thinking about it, everybody understands that basic stuff. And then I'll go on to questions, some of which you gave me when we talked last week. Others, you might have some new ones now. So should we look at it, Harold, or should I just review it?
Yeah, let me see. I think I found something that on, on Wikipedia that might help us.
For the bonus question of the morning, how many books of the Bible are in the Jewish Bible? That's our Jeopardy question. How many books are in the Jewish Bible? Lori Krotman.
24.
24. Excellent. Now you're moving to advance. So there are 24 books in the Jewish Bible. Oh, this is an interesting chart. Let's see what this is. So this is divided up according to.
So this is the Tanakh we were comparing. So on the left is just.
Okay, good. Okay, excellent. Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you, Harold.
So
good. So we look at the Tanakh.
Reason if they're in the Ketuvim, they're in.
Okay, let me just.
It'll make sense. It'll make sense.
Yeah, this is a great chart. Okay, thank you. So everybody sees where it says Tanakh, Jewish Bible. I'm just going to review a little bit because for a lot of you, I know this was brand new, and this is really important to get the picture of. So Tanakh is an acronym. The T stands for Torah, the N stands for Nevi'im or prophets, and the KH at the end stands for Ketuvim, which are the writings. So Tanakh are the three large sections of the books of the Jewish Bible, or the Tanakh or Mikra, it's classically called. Are we going to go back to that? Did I lose Harold? Because that's a good.
I think Harold's woody Wi-Fi is not working so well right
now. So let's go over that. So three big sections of the Jewish Bible, also known as the Tanakh, also known as the Mikra. The first section, T of Tanakh, is for Torah, which is confusing because the word Torah can mean a small reference, which just means the 5 books of Moses, or it could mean everything that's Torah literally is from a word for teaching. So it can be used broadly or narrowly, and that can be confusing. But for this purposes, Sue Rodzansky, you are walking sideways. You are so talented. Oh, there you are. So for our purposes, for today, Torah means the 5 books of Moses. Nun stands for Nevi'im or prophets, and the KH or K stands for Ketuvim, which are the writings. There are 24 books. The reason that's a little confusing is because in the books, well, there are many reasons it's confusing, of course, but in the books of the prophets, which is the second of the 3 big sections, there's a collection of 12 prophets that we call the Treyasar, the 12. And so those are 12 prophets. In English, they're often called the 12 minor prophets, but there's nothing minor about them except that they're small in size. So they're not to be considered any less important than the other ones. It's just they're shorter. So they get lumped for the Jewish Bible into that one book called Treyasar. The Protestants and the Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox traditions all spread them out. So that's why that's one of the reasons they have more books in number, but not the only reason. Okay, okay, thank you, Harold. And this is really an excellent overview. So we see, Torah is translated here as law. I'd really say teaching, but that's okay. So these are the Hebrew names. On the Bereshit is the Hebrew name, and Genesis is the Greek name, then that becomes the English name. And as I said last week, the Hebrew names are really all from words that are found in the first verse of the beginning of the book. Nothing more significant than that. But of course, that has meaning, but they're not literal translations of the Greek. In fact, they're quite different. But Midbar literally means in the desert, and the Greek is the Greek word for numbers. Vayikra is, as I said, means and he called, but it is a book that has a lot of information about the Levitical class or the priestly class. Shemot means names. Did we lose Harold again? Oh well. So the names the names are not translations of each other, and that can be confusing, but significant for referring to them. We have to remember that originally the books of the Bibles were not even divided up into chapters and verses. Like the idea that we could refer to Exodus chapter 12, verse 1, the original texts as we have them had no divisions, no vowels, no punctuation. All of that is added much later. The idea of chapter and verse doesn't really even come until the Middle Ages. So that's actually in the world of Jewish history, fairly late. And Harold has returned. Yay, Harold. Yay, Harold. So the first section, so you'll see the Christians refer to what we call Torah as the Pentateuch, or 5 books of Moses. But Jews also say Chumash. So this is not exactly, so Chumash is the Hebrew word for 5, or has in it the shoresh, the root for the Hebrew word for 5. So the 5 books of Moses, which are those first 5 books of the Torah, are also in the Jewish Bible called the Chumash, or Chumash Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of Chumshei Moshe, the 5 books of Moses. So the original language of all of these is Hebrew, but the alphabet that they were probably written in was the older Hebrew alphabet, also sometimes called the Phoenician alphabet, also called, well, we won't go into that too much. Okay, so prophets. So the first, if you think of these as 3 concentric circles, the first concentric circle are the 5 books of Moses, or the Torah. The second concentric circle around that are the book of the prophets. And the first book of the prophets, Joshua or Yehoshua, takes up the story. If the book of Deuteronomy, hold on, one of the dogs wants to get in. Okay, leave that one open. So the narrative of the 5 books of Moses ends when the Jewish people or the Israelite people are on a mountain overlooking the promised land. Moses dies, Joshua becomes the leader, but they don't get into the promised land. Yehoshua, Joshua, who's been at the very end of the book of Devarim, he is made the leader to replace Moses. In the book of Joshua, the story picks up where it ended and tells the story of entering the promised land and going through that piece of history. Judges is likewise around this time, and the book of Ruth. All of these books are, as they're called, historical books by Christians. Also, we call them historical too, because they tell a lot of the history. And in the book of Ruth is here because the story of the book of Ruth takes place at the time of the judges. So that's why it's listed here, even though it doesn't appear here in our book. So the green, if you go down, Harold, can you go down? So what they've done here is they've put the books in historical order, even though that's not where they appear in the Bible itself. So it's a little confusing. So what they've tried to do is show you where in the history they exist, but they're not actually showing you totally where, they're trying to put the books into a historical order. That's very interesting. All right, so then the middle section is all about Nevi'im, prophets. These books that are in green put in here are placed in there to show you where they appear historically, but that's not where they appear in the book, in the order of the Jewish books. Okay, so that's a little confusing. Divrei Hayamim and Ezra Nehemiah. Interesting. Okay, let's go down to the beginning of Ketuvim. Oh, so there's, no. Wow, this is really weird. This is really weird the way this has been organized. So, okay, so minor prophets here, the 12 or the Trei Asar. These are all major prophets, but again, they're shorter. So they are, for Jewish Bible, they're all in one book. So you see Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, the book of Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Interesting. Okay, so let's see Ketuvim, the third section. This is so weird how this is, there's something strange about this. I don't think that this was set up by a Jewish. Okay, so Tanakh, the Ketuvim are they've really set this up historically. Ketuvim are the final section. They follow the prophets. So I don't know how they're organizing this. The Ketuvim comes after the prophets for Jews. As I said, Christians do it totally differently. And for Jews, Tehillim, Psalms are the first book of the book of writings. So I'm trying to understand what this chart is trying to show. Maybe they've done the whole thing in historical order.
Can you hear me, Rabbi? Can you
Now
hear
I
me?
can, yes. Hello, Harold, I can't hear you anymore.
Okay. So if Babette could give me co-host again, there was another chart that may be better. She's
Okay.
sharing now because my internet was coming and
Yeah,
going.
sorry
Let me
about
get the
that,
other
Harold.
chart,
Yes, but thank you so much for trying this.
which I
So
think you're going to like
this is
more.
fascinating. It's really fun to
Okay,
analyze
so-
all the different ways that the Bible is organized.
Hold on, sorry.
And Protestants, Catholics, and Eastern Orthodox traditions all do it differently from each other. And we who are Jewish often
You
think
just
the
keep
word
on going. I'm going to send it to Babette.
Okay, so hold on. So Harold,
Okay.
your Wi-Fi is super sketchy. Either you're not near your router or it's sketchy where you are. My suggestion would be to just go with
Yeah.
audio and not
I know
video.
it is.
It's okay, I'll talk about it.
Okay.
So I just sent you a link.
Okay, can I just say I didn't realize how weird my hair looks?
I just sent you a link to
Rabbi,
We're losing you, Harold.
I put the link for this in the chart, in the chat. Above there, I put the link for this, and there is a chart above the chart that we've been showing that has it organized differently.
Aha, okay, so maybe,
If you click
wonder-
on Wikipedia.
maybe we can make Adria co-host and she could share that.
No, I think I gave Babette the info, so.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it is now, so for the Jewish Bible, it's organized with the 5 books of Moses at the center. All right, so let's see how this is organized.
I actually have another one that I sent to Babette, which is even better. I put in the chat, which is even more.
Okay, this is definitely, this is,
Try the one I just put in chat. Sorry about this.
okay, it's okay. This is why whenever you see the reference of the word Bible, be careful. They're actually different. It's not just that the Jewish Bible and the Christian Old Testament are the same book. They're not. I think all are equally valid, of course, but if we want to know what the Jewish Bible is, it's very interesting historically, the canonization of the Christian Bible, and by that, the first is the Orthodox, then the Catholic, then the Protestants. Why and how they made changes in the order are significant. Okay, so the 24 books. So you see that first under that is very important, why some of the numbers are different. So Samuel has Samuel 1, Samuel 2, Kings 1 and 2, Chronicles 1 and 2. We Jews consider that one, each of that one book. Okay? So the first concentric circle, the first is the 5 books of Moses, then the prophets, and here's the section of the prophets, which is the second major division. And then the third major division, the third concentric circle, if you will, are the Ketuvim, if you keep going down. So Ketuvim, which literally means writings, it's very simple, means writings, has 11 books in it. And this is where we find the book of Psalms. For Jews, the book of Psalms is the first book in the third section of the Bible, the book of Psalms right there, Tehillim. And it is all the, honestly, Ketuvim is a little bit of a potpourri. It's kind of like what's left over after the first two sections get into this section, honestly. So you have things that are not part of the historical narrative, except you also do. Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicle all tell a part of the historical story. And Tehillim, Mishlei, and Eov, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. And then the 5 Megillot, which are the 5 Megillot that we read on different festivals during the year. Song of Songs on Passover, Ruth, we just read on Shavuot, Lamentations on Tisha B'Av, Ecclesiastes or Kohelet on Sukkot, and Esther on Purim. So one thing that I pointed out is that there's no reference in the Jewish Bible to the story of Hanukkah. The whole story of the Maccabees is for Jews what we call post-biblical, meaning it happened after the Bible was closed or the canon was completed. The books of the Maccabees are found in some of the Christian Bibles, and maybe all of them, I'm not exactly sure. So you notice down at the bottom here, we have the reference to the Aleppo Codex, Leningrad Codex, and the Masoretic, which is what we've discussed. And also in this group, if you want me to go over what those are, I can do a whole nother class on that. But it's really important to understand the structure of the Jewish Bible. 5 books of Moses, Torah, the first circle. Second circle are the prophets and Nevi'im, and the third circle are the writings. And all together they add up to 24 books. And the book of Psalms is found in that third section. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and just see, is that all clear? Any questions of any kind about the structure of the Bible, knowing where the Psalms comes in? Anything that I said not clear? Totally. Go ahead, Doug. Is that?
Why do you call it a concentric circle instead of a linear arrangement?
So the reason I call it a concentric circle, that is actually a very sophisticated question.
Shep has.
What? Let me answer this question first. So the reason I call it a concentric circle, and maybe even next week I'll draw this so you'll see it that way, is because as those concentric circles go out farther, each generation adds a concentric circle. And the rule for studying Jewish text is that if you're, whatever concentric circle you're in, you can never, how shall we say, contradict any of the concentric circles before you. And you have more authority than any of the concentric circles after you. There's a sense that the closer you are to the Mount Sinai experience, the more authority you have. But since Judaism has this absolute requirement and understanding that we must interpret what came before, every generation is allowed, not only allowed, but encouraged to interpret the earlier concentric circles. And I find the linear image harder to understand. It makes it sound too rigid. And so for instance, the concentric circle so the first 3 concentric circles have a very strong border around all 3. They are all part of this, what we call in Judaism, the written Torah, the Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah. Then the next concentric circle is the Mishnah. The next concentric circle after the Mishnah is the Gemara or Talmud. And then there's a strong circle around those 2. And then the early, what we call the early teachers, the Rishonim, we call them, and then the Achronim. And each of those generations, once you've passed the Achronim generation, basically, everything inside of that is considered holier and more authoritative. And I find that thinking about it as concentric circles and gives you a really clear picture. And linear one it's harder to understand because we're always going back to the center of the concentric circle, which is very different, right, than a lot of West, like science, for instance. In science, we really believe the more recent is going to be the more authoritative. The farther you are on the linear line of scientific knowledge, we hope, as long as we're continuing, the more recent science we think of as more authoritative. It's for me, there's nothing, I wouldn't say there's any, it's my way of teaching it and understanding it. So that's why I use it. But go ahead.
So anything within a given circle is equal to everything else in that given circle?
According to Jewish tradition, yes.
Okay.
Now, I will say, and we'll get to this, you can, how shall we say, you can contradict what came before you. You just have to use you can't say, I reject so-and-so. What you can say is, we did not understand correctly what so-and-so meant. So there is a whole system of halakhic interpretation, halakha meaning the traditional Jewish law, and you have to follow certain principles of halakhic interpretation. And I'll give you a famous example of that. In the Bible, it says, ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I'm sure you've all heard that from Parshat Emor, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. So that's in the written Bible. So that has authority that following generations can't just say they were wrong. So in that, the circle of the Mishnah and the Gemara, which is very early, but not as early as the Bible, the rabbis were not comfortable with the idea of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Clearly, they were not comfortable with it. So they used their various systems of legal interpretation to say, if you're reading it literally, you don't understand what it really means. Because what could an eye for an eye mean? Let's say, your whole livelihood is based on sight. If you lost your eye, that eye is much more valuable than my eye. If I lost my eye and my livelihood doesn't depend on my ability to see, my sight is not worth as much. So therefore, what the rabbis said, which is incredible, in the Mishnah they say, an eye for an eye does not mean literally my eye for your eye. If you poke out my eye, the courts have to figure out what is my financial loss because my eyesight was lost. And you have to compensate me according to what my eyesight was valuable for. So in other words, if my livelihood is based on my eyesight, the courts have to give me from you the equivalent of what my entire life's earning would be, but I can't do it without my eyesight. And you have to support my family that way. Now I understand, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if we have lawyers here, but that's what American law tries to do too, is to figure out I'm not a lawyer, so I won't even pretend to say something about that. So the rabbi said, no, an eye for an eye is metaphorical. It's not literal. It means how much is an eyesight worth? And then they replaced financial compensation. So you see, they didn't say the Bible was wrong. They said, you're not understanding it correctly. And that happens all the time in biblical exegesis. But yes, within your concentric circle, you're an equal. Oops, sorry, okay. I keep bumping my Torah.
Shep has his hand up. Shep, if you want to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, Rabbi, you said that it was in the Middle Ages when we started using chapter and verse. Since the Christians, I think, do the same system, did we invent it, or did they, and did we borrow it from them? Or how did it come about?
Christians started the idea of chapter and verse, and Jews had to adapt it because there would be challenges to Christian political leadership in the Middle Ages would force Jewish scholars it would be like the town center, and they would have challenges to the Jewish Bible to try and publicly show that the Jews were wrong and Christians were right.
Really?
And Christians used chapter and verse to make a reference, which Jews had never done before. So they would say, what about in chapter 5, verse 1, doesn't the Bible say that Jesus will be born to a virgin? And Jews had to adapt that in order to be able to respond to these medieval public challenges. And so then we started doing our Bibles that way too. And it became, as people also were less educated, because before that, you would refer to, you'd say Parsha, you'd say the name of the Parsha, and then you'd quote it, assuming everybody knew where it was. And honestly, most Jews were not so educated. So it's not like most Jews could even follow along. So it actually became very useful for Jews as well.
That was called the disputations.
Exactly, Shep. So I wasn't going to use that.
Yeah.
They're the disputations.
And they stopped doing it because the Jews kept on winning, so it was not good.
Well, it's pretty hard when there are religious traditions. I mean, everybody can read things, it's faith. If you want to read your Bible to say this, you can do that, but you can't prove that it's correct or incorrect. It's an issue of faith. Yes, those were called the disputations if you want to look that up. It was a pretty horrific period of medieval history, which is why if you took my anti-Semitism class, the kind of irony or the paradox is that for most of Jewish history, Jews did much more poorly in Christian countries than they did in Muslim countries. And in the 20th century, that reversed, where Jews did worse in Muslim countries and better in Christian majority countries. But that's only the 20th century. Before the 20th century, it was quite the opposite. And the disputations is an example of some of the of medieval Christian Europe.
Thank you.
So any other questions about the structure of the Bible or any of those? And you could just say, I don't understand, say it again. This class is supposed to be completely at whatever pace we want it to be. No other questions? We have no other questions or comments about it? Do people feel like you have you've got an image of it now? So how many books in the Jewish Bible? 24. Remember that number. This will put you on Jewish Jeopardy in very good shape. If you're ever on Jewish Jeopardy, to know that number is a very important number. And the 5 books of Moses are the only thing that's on the Torah scrolls that we have in the synagogue. So when you see a Torah scroll, and we take that out every Shabbat, every Yontif, for every Bar Mitzvah, for every service, every one of those Torah scrolls has the exact same thing on it, and it's only the 5 books of Moses. So the innermost of the concentric circles. And that's on the 5 books of Moses. The prophets and the writings are not on the Torah scroll. That's also really important to understand. So Tehillim, Psalms, which are part of the Bible, are not going to be found on the Torah scroll that we unroll on Shabbat morning. But they are still part of the Bible. Shep, do you want to?
I have a question. Were the prophets and the writings, were they also originally written on scrolls?
Yes.
I mean, how did we get, really? Do we have scrolls of them?
So, first of all, the most old, that's a bad word. The oldest scrolls that we have on which we have any Bible are the Dead Sea Scrolls. That doesn't have everything, but it does have big pieces of, for instance, Isaiah, which is the most famous of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's called the Isaiah Scroll, and it has almost the entire book of Isaiah, maybe even the entire book. I'm not sure about that. But it has a very, 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 very big chunk of the book of Isaiah. However, remember I said the Dead Sea Scrolls around the time of Jesus. So that's roughly 2,000 years ago, right? But if you remember the timeline that we've been talking about, King David and King Saul are from 1,000 years before that. So there's a 1,000-year gap between King David and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then 2,000 years from the Dead Sea Scrolls to us. So we're talking about a 3,000-year arc. In the 1,000 years between King David, roughly, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the only thing that we have that shows anything that's written is a very, 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 very tiny silver amulet or silver piece from the time of the first temple, which is King Solomon, of the priestly blessing. Not the entire thing, but a piece of it. And that now is in the Israel Museum. And Karen Kropp put up in our Psalms Facebook group when I talked about this many weeks ago a picture of this little piece of silver that has the priestly blessing, which is from the book of Numbers. It's from the 5 books of Moses. That's the oldest thing we have. And why do we still have it? Because it's silver. It wasn't on parchment. Anything on parchment most likely gets destroyed pretty quickly. Parchment only will last under very, very, very narrow circumstances. Has to be super dry. And because parchment was expensive back then, people also reused parchment all the time. Why would you wouldn't, so parchment gets used a lot and it doesn't last. The only writings that we have that last from this period, remember, I don't know if you guys remember when I showed you the Mesha Stela, the Mesha stone, that's writing that's on a stone. Or the Tel Dan inscription, both of which have references, we think, to the house of David. The only reason those 2 things have lasted this long is because they were inscribed on stone. So that the Dead Sea Scrolls is an outlier. That's very rare to have parchment that's old, and we don't have anything that's earlier than that. And we think much of the Torah was probably oral tradition in any case. It was probably passed down a lot orally, as most ancient traditions would have storytellers or people who were trained to repeat things for the community to hear it. Most people probably weren't even literate. So it's very rare to have anything that's even written from this time period. It's mostly, so when you think of how do we know, for instance, hieroglyphics, which are even a little bit more ancient, they're written on stone. Or carved into stone, not written on, but carved in. So it's not even ink on stone, they're often carved in. If ink survives, and there are some fantastic examples at the Met, if we ever get back to the Met. And by the way, that would be fun to go to because the Egyptian collection of the Met is very interesting as Jews to see things there. But sometimes we do have some paint that has survived on stone. The color might have faded, but nothing like parchment will last that long. Yeah, so you just have to, when you start studying ancient history, it's very, very different in terms of what you even can have access to understand things. Somebody else had a question up? Okay. Is that a question? No, that's just Bora drinking her coffee. What?
I don't see anybody with any hands
Okay.
up. Oh, so, but Sherry Weiss in the chat wants to know where the Maccabees came from.
So the book of Maccabees it's in Greek, and it's part of the Christian Bible. I think both Protestant and Catholic, although we'd have to look at Harold's chart to be sure. So we know that there are books that kind of didn't get into our Bible. So sometimes they didn't get in because they're more recent, so to speak, and sometimes we don't actually know why they didn't get in. But the book of Maccabees is from a later period. They're in the Greek, and the reason we even have them is only because the Christians in the Greek Bible, the Septuagint, kept them as holy text. So there you see the book of Maccabees down there. Yeah, and this looks like a Christian. Yeah, this is definitely Christian. So you see the book of Maccabees there, which we don't have in our Bible. And somebody asked, I'm looking at the questions when I asked people what questions you had. Where does Pirkei Avot fit into this whole story about the book of Bible, of the book of the Jewish Bible? So Pirkei Avot is from the Mishnah. So remember I said if the 3 books of the book of the Bible, and I'm going to do this for next week, are part of a big concentric circle, 1, 2, 3, and then around the 3rd is a big heavy line. The next concentric circle is Mishnah. And that takes place roughly from the year 0 to the year 200. And that's when the rabbis started trying to understand what's written in those 24 books of the Bible. And the Mishnah covers that 200 years. Then, and this will be easier when I draw this, then from roughly 200 to 500 is what we call the Talmud or Gemara, which was when the period of rabbis of that 300 years is trying to understand the period of the rabbis of the 200 years before. And this is where our layers of tradition develop. So the Pirkei Avot is a section of the Mishnah. It's written between the years 0 and 200 post-biblical, but we would call it Mishnaic. One interesting thing is that when you study Jewish history, all the periods of Jewish history are based on literary concepts. You know, some European history is also the kings, right? You know, you study Victoria or queens, it's Victorian or Edwardian or King Louis the blah blah and King Henry the blah blah. In Jewish history, it's literary. So we talk about the biblical period of Jewish history, the Mishnaic period of Jewish history, etc. So Pirkei Avot fits into that. I don't know who asked that question.
That was Sherry Weiss. And then and then Noreen said, why is kings and prophets?
Excellent. So Nevi'im, the prophets, is really covering the period of the prophets. It doesn't mean every single book in it is actually about a prophet. And that's why, that's an excellent question, why the Christians, it didn't make sense. And if you looked at Christian divisions, they really separate historical books from the prophets. For us, because the prophets took place during these periods of history, it's all mixed up together. But when we read Haftarah, which is reading from the section of the prophets, we read from all of those different. Harold, that's not exactly totally correct about Talmud equals Mishnah plus Gemara. This is another case where Talmud and Gemara actually mean the same thing. Talmud is Hebrew, Gemara is Aramaic. But it's really confusing, and I wasn't going to totally go there, but because it's another thing. So Talmud and Gemara could either mean the Mishnah plus Talmud together, or it could only mean the commentary on the Mishnah. It's a little confusing. That it's annoying. But Gemara is Aramaic and Talmud is Hebrew. So those two words are interchangeable. But the problem is, technically, like if I were to say, let's study some Talmud, it could mean Mishnah because Mishnah is technically part of the Talmud. So we separate it out. They're very, very different. The Mishnah is written mostly in Hebrew, and the commentary on the Mishnah, which we call Talmud or Gemara, is almost entirely written in Aramaic, almost entirely. Okay.
I see Michael Goldstein has his hand up.
Thank you. Good morning. Rabbi, you talk about the rabbis over 200 years or 400 years did this or that. How did they communicate and where were they?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. That's a big question. There were centers of study in which there were schools that we know of. There were especially for the 300 years of what I call the Talmud or Gemara commentating on the Mishnah. They were mostly in in Tiberias and in Babylon, in what we call the Babylonian Bible, which is Bavel, which was in two towns in Babylonia called Sura and Pumbedita. So Sura and Pumbedita were the towns in which they had these, kind of think of them like academies, and where people came to study. And there was also a community of scholars doing similarly in Tiberias or Tiberia, which is in the northern part of Israel on the Sea of Galilee. Tiberias was a very important city, obviously in the time of Jesus. On the north of the Sea of Galilee, for instance, is where the Sermon on the Mount took place, in a town on the very northern part of the Sea of Galilee. And on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee is the ancient city of Tiberias, Tiberia. And there was also kind of an academy there. And this was especially true after the destruction of the temple in 70, where Jerusalem, there were no Jews in Jerusalem after that. Jews had to leave Jerusalem. So some went to Babylonia, to Sura and Pumbedita. I love saying that. And that's where we have the Babylonian Talmud, is why it's called the Babylonian Talmud. And the Jerusalem Talmud was actually written in Tiberias. It wasn't written in Jerusalem. Again, it's so annoying. Say it so the name means what you're trying to say. There are reasons, but that's it. So these different academies became known as places where scholars would gather. Kind of like, this was Harvard and that was Yale, and they would gather there.
So Ellen Poster put, the Mishnah is not part of Talmud.
So this is what I'm saying. It's so confusing. The Mishnah is from the years 0 to 200. Then from 300, then 200 to 500 is the second period. The word Talmud can be used to mean both of those things or just the second 300 years. It's so frustrating. So for a Gemara scholar or Talmud scholar, so Gemara is Aramaic, Talmud is Hebrew, they mean exactly the same thing. So if I'm a Gemara scholar and I'm saying I'm studying Gemara or Talmud, it could be Mishnah or the later stuff. You don't distinguish. I'm distinguishing it now so that you understand. And going back to Doug's earlier question, the Mishnah has a little bit more authority than those 300 years that follow it. So it means that the scholars of that 300 years following the first period have to find clever ways to interpret what came before. But I'll give you an example. The Bible says, keep the Sabbath. It doesn't tell you how to keep the Sabbath. It says two things about the Sabbath. You can't gather sticks up on the Sabbath and you can't light a fire. That's it. In the 5 books of Moses, in the 24 books of the Jewish Bible, that's it for what it means to keep the Sabbath. Mostly it was about going up to the Temple Mount and offering sacrifices. So the rabbis of the Mishnah start saying, well, what does it mean to keep the Sabbath? And they come up with a few ideas, which I won't go into right now, but it's because we're ending. And then the rabbis of the Talmud say, hold on, but they didn't explain how to do X, Y, or Z. And so there's an entire section, all my books are at CBST for this. But so there are 2 laws about Shabbat in the Bible. And the Talmud has a portfolio that's about this thick, all about how to observe Shabbat. Because they're trying to understand how to actually live but they come up with a very clever understanding of how to come up with the rules for Shabbat. But it's nothing about that is in the Bible itself. All right, I think we're about out of time and our other class will start joining us. So please, folks, keep sending in questions. Was this helpful? How were we today on, if not, let me know, because I'm totally here just to schmooze. So we're gonna open up and other people are gonna join in and we're gonna take 15 minutes and then we'll start Psalm 7. Thank you, everybody.
Keep putting your questions in the chat because the chat gets saved and I send it to Harold and the rabbi afterwards. So if you have other questions.
Those questions won't get lost.
Yep, they don't get lost.
I'm looking at the chat with the questions that you had last time.
Rabbi, I have a question about Friday night service and the 3 speakers.
Yeah, sure.
Can we share that with everybody? It was so personal.
Yeah, they knew they were speaking publicly, and we will be able to actually, absolutely, you could share it. Okay. And I think we'll pull the 3 talks out of the whole service as well.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear about people's reactions. What did you think?
Wow, blown away, really.
Tell me what was
David's was for me the most useful. It was going along with a lot of things that we've been talking about. I've been talking about, thinking about, and I thought that he spoke to us most directly. Narda talked about her relation, and it was useful. I mean, not, but David he was leading the rally. That was how I saw it, and I thought it was very good.
Yeah, and I really wanted Narda and Boise to have a platform to say what was on their mind. There's no agenda.
minimizing them. I was
yeah.
just,
And Narda's story was just so, it happens, these things happen every second, every day. So I thought her story was so poignant, and her honesty. It was very brave of them to talk like that.
You know, Narda is how we found Babette. Right, Babette? So Narda and Shelley are both professional stage managers. I don't think Shelley has done that for a while, but when we were looking for somebody to help us run CBSC services, when we realized it was too big for us, it was Shelley and Narda that brought us to Bruce and Babette.
Yep. In fact, when we were at a stage management meeting, Shelley came over to me and pointed to Narda and was like, "Can you introduce me to her?"
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So
really, you introduced them?
I can't remember it was at that meeting, but it was shortly thereafter that the two of them got together. So I go back. I mean, Shelley and I go way back.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how I started working with CBST.
Yeah. And now Narda is the is the head of the stage management department of the Yale School of Drama.
Narda is an amazing stage manager. Not just that, but she is also she works with August Wilson's estate. So she is like their stage manager.
Yeah, he has said when he was alive, he said the only person he wanted to stage manage any of his plays was Narda.
Yeah, she's a brilliant human being and just an amazing stage manager, just really. And she wrote a book and everything. She just really is a fabulous human being. So is Shelley. I love Shelley too.
Yeah. Any other reactions to Friday night? Who else were other people with us Friday night?
I was so moved by David. You know, he was talking right into the screen, and it was as if he were talking directly to us, and it really penetrated for me. It was very powerful.
We have quite a lineup for Pride this year. I don't know if people noticed this. So this Friday night we have, I'm gonna get his book from here. Saed Atshun, who's a friend of mine, who's a professor at Swarthmore. I don't know if, can you see this? I'm not sure which way it goes. There you go.
Yeah.
So I met Saed many years ago when I went on an LGBT leaders trip to Palestine. And he was the leader of the, we were there for about 10 days. And he was the leader of that delegation. There were 15 of us. And he and I have remained very good friends. And so he's going to speak this Friday night. And I think it'll be very challenging and interesting and provocative, which is exactly what I think a religious community should be. And then Friday night after that, for Pride, Masha Gessen, am I holding this right? Can you see that?
Yes.
Masha is speaking, but it's interesting. She wants me to interview her during the service. And then after the service, for both of them, we'll have 45 minutes or so, kind of like we did after the concert. You know, people will get off the Facebook thing and go into a Zoom and have a discussion with her or with Saed. And Mayor Pete Buttigieg is going to be offering greetings for our Gay Pride service. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so we have quite a lineup.
Wow.
Yeah. This,
Rabbi, is Chani Geller doing anything with us?
Yes. CBST has some great programs. So a week from tonight, Chani and Abby Stein and Rabbi Moskowitz and I are doing a show about, a program about the TV show Unorthodox. And have people seen that show?
Yep.
So, and we're going to talk about LGBT folks and the Hasidic community, both of them. And we're going to have two people, Chani and Abby, who are both from the Hasidic world themselves. So we're going to talk about the TV show and talk about their journey out of ultra-Orthodoxy. So yeah, we've got quite a lot. And tonight, Randy is doing, just for CBST members, a special town hall about issues around reopening public schools, or any schools, honestly, in America, and what has to be done for that to happen. That's tonight. If you're a CBSE member, you should have gotten an email on Friday, and you have to register, and then you get the info tonight for that.
Got one this morning.
What?
Got one this morning.
Oh, you did? Okay, see, there you go. And Thursday, I'm doing a thing for Temple Emmanuel, their Stryker Center, which is their big programming. I'm interviewing Tony Kushner. So it's quite a lineup we've got.
Speaking of Orthodox, can you describe how Tara Cohen reached us, or how this all came about? I saw her smicha, which was wonderful, but how did this all come about? I'm absolutely intrigued.
Sure. So there is, starting about 10, 15 years ago, there started to be a movement within progressive Orthodoxy to ordain women to be Orthodox rabbis or rabbah. Each of them uses a different word. They don't all use the word rabbi, but as a signifier that they have the training, hold on, that they have the training to be able to interpret Jewish law. That's really what an Orthodox rabbi does. You don't need a rabbi to get married. You don't need a rabbi to get divorced. You don't need a rabbi to do almost anything in Judaism. A rabbi really is a teacher. So this progressive part of, but of course, culturally, Orthodoxy can't accept women in that role, even if technically, right? So there's a progressive led by Avi Weiss in the Bronx, in Riverdale, to create a school that would train women to become educated enough to be able to do Orthodox halachic interpretation of law. They would not be able to be witnesses, because according to Orthodoxy, women can't be a witness. So even though she's now an Orthodox rabbi, she can't sign a wedding ketubah or sign a divorce document. So there are limits on what she can do.
Can she sit in on a bet din?
No, not an Orthodox bet din. She could do a lot of other things though, and now there's a whole. So the school started in the same building that Avi Weiss's synagogue is in Riverdale, and they also started a progressive Orthodox seminary for men called YCT. And they're training Orthodox men to be progressive Orthodox rabbis. And so I've been talking to the YCT program for years about how we could get one of their students to be an intern at CBST. You know, they couldn't work on Shabbat. They couldn't do certain, you know, it'd be they couldn't do a lot of the things that our interns do. They couldn't lead services. But we could have them do other things, because I wanted very much to do that. So when Rabbi Moskowitz joined CBST, his fiance and now his wife is the Talmud professor at the school for women. And in many of my conversations with them, we talked about how we could get a woman student to CBST. They couldn't lead services, they couldn't work on Shabbat or Yontiv, but they could, and we can't call them a rabbinical intern, but we called them a pastoral and educational intern. And she did pastoral work and did educational work. So we had to make compromises in order to make it possible. And they had to make compromises in order to make it possible. But for me, it was definitely worth it. She's an amazing, amazing teacher, an amazing pastoral, compassionate, great. So it was a huge success. So she's staying with us for the summer, and then she'll be done in, so they're about, I think, so it's 10 years that they've been ordaining women. And there are Orthodox synagogues who are part of this movement that have women rabbis who serve as halachic. The most important thing they serve as is this halachic mediator and decider.
From what it appears,
they are hated. You can imagine. They are hated by the other Orthodox as much as the other Orthodox hate us. I mean, they are really, really hated.
Did I see correctly that that they would have a women's only service wherein they would read, but they wouldn't read from the actual Torah, but
oh no, in a women's only service they could do everything.
Okay.
They can read Torah, absolutely. They can't do it if there are men present.
Okay, because I thought there was a smicha in their chapel for the men on one side and the women dominating the rest. So that wasn't a formal Torah service. Okay.
I don't know. I don't remember what that was, but that's been happening since the 70s. When I was Orthodox high school student in the early 70s, there were women's minyanim that were reading Torah. So there's a thing called the partnership minyanim now, which exists. And there's one on the Upper West Side, which is very, very famous, where it's Orthodox, but women have pushed the envelope, and the men in the community obviously are part of this, to push the envelope as far as possible. So women give Divrei Torah. Women will usually lead the davening up until Baruch Hu, but it's a wonderful, wonderful synagogue on the Upper West Side. And it's part of this universe of what they call now partnership minyanim, where the mechitza is very, as small as it can halachically be, and women are as equal as possible without stepping over the line.
Why are they unequal, Rabbi, in the Orthodox world? I'm trying to, I mean, what
Oh boy.
oh.
No, it's a good question. In the Orthodox world, first of all, I'd say within the Orthodox world, they won't say they're unequal, they'll say they're different. You and I hear that and we react to that. But having been in the Orthodox world, I understand it. They're just, and within the Orthodox world, there's a really deep belief that men and women are different and have different roles. God loves everybody the same. They would not say that God loves men more than God loves women. And honestly, in my high school, I went to an Orthodox high school, the girls, we felt like we were superior to the boys, and the boys had it much harder because the rabbis were always with the boys. Like we were in the women's section for prayer, so we could talk to each other. The boys had the rabbis sitting next to each other. Like I never thought, again, it was a progressive Orthodox world. It was all the girls in my high school class became psychiatrists, doctors, lawyers. I'm the only one who became a rabbi, interestingly. None of the boys in my class became rabbis either. But there was just a feeling that there are different roles, but it wasn't a feeling that therefore women were less than. That's not so much true as you get farther and farther right-wing Jewish life. But we're about to hit 10 o'clock, but this is a bigger conversation, which I'm happy to continue, but I don't want us to lose out on the Psalms.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi.
So for those of you who live on the Upper West Side and when we can ever go back to shul hopping, it's definitely worth going to the partnership minyan. I think it's on 80-something street. And you could see Orthodoxy as it's evolving and growing. It's very exciting. And the women there, like Rabbi Moskowitz's wife, is a Talmud scholar. I mean, she knows more Talmud than most, Orthodox male rabbis.
Rabbi, this is Judy. Real quick for Tikkun for Shavuot, they did it Monday night because it wasn't Yontif, and there were a number of women that they gave names. I think this is a group on the upper part of Manhattan that's more liberal because there were women. They called her Maharat, and she gave a teaching. So it was really rather exciting.
Yeah, it's it's very cutting edge, and it's really exciting.
Okay.
All right.
It's 10 o'clock.
It's 10 o'clock. Who's leading us in? Julia, I think it's you, right?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 minute. We had some technical difficulties with the other text.
Hi, Julia.
Who said hi? Oh, hi. Hi, Carolee.
Your mom-in-law.
Oh. My mom, right there. Oh. So
My daughter.
We're gonna sing some Shefa Gold this morning. Little meditative chant.
All right, I'm not
I'll just get started. Sorry, Yael?
I'm sorry, I don't have screen share abilities. Bruce or Babette, you need to let me do that.
While that's happening, I'll get started. The words are Vaz Amra Shem Havaya Elyon. It's from the last verse of Psalm 7. I will sing praise so, and this is Shefa's translation, I will sing praise so that I may know the highest essence of divine experience. Vazamra Shem Havaya Elyon. 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 Vazamra Shem Havaya Elyon.
Julia, thank you for that. I wasn't familiar that, so everybody sees that these are the last words of Psalm 7. What Julia just sang that Shefa Gold wrote are from the last line of Psalm 7. And again, and Shefa is fantastic at this, of taking just a phrase and forgetting everything else, all the studying we've been doing, trying to understand this or that. She just is focusing on those final words that I will sing to the name. What was the translation that Shefa used there?
Havaya.
So how does she translate it? What is the English?
She doesn't. She did. Oh, in the English she does. Yes, the highest essence of divine existence.
I will sing. What does it say?
I will sing praise. I will sing praise so that I may know the highest essence of divine existence.
Beautiful. So look at that. She's taken this one phrase from the last verse, not even the whole verse, and created a chant and just explored with this very beautiful translation. Fantastic example. And this is throughout traditional Jewish prayer, how pieces of Psalms are taken. So good morning, everybody. Good morning. I think we're now starting, this is week 13. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is week 13 of our studying Psalms together. And I'm happy to welcome Rabbi Yael Rapport to our class today. I don't know where, I know she's here. I don't know where she is exactly. So she's joining us today because she's going to be leading class tomorrow, because some of you, I'm sure you got the announcement that Janet Pavlov's mother, Gilda, who's a longtime member of CBST, passed away yesterday. So I'm going to be doing the funeral, and the cemetery only allows a few people in the funeral. So we will be Zooming the funeral if I can make that work. Let's see if I can make that work. And the funeral will be at 11 o'clock tomorrow. So I have to drive out to the funeral in the morning. So Rabbi Rapport will be here. And I imagine today and tomorrow, we're going to be going over personal Psalm reflections on Psalm 7.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, good morning.
If James will be a member of the class tomorrow.
Look how cute that boy chick is.
We're very excited to do some deep study on Psalm 7. It is, in fact, James's favorite psalm. He communicated to me.
So great to see him.
We're trying to sing along with Julia. You're glad that we were muted.
Oh my God, he's so big. It is amazing how that happens. You feed him and look what happens. All right, so Psalm 7, I'm going to just read through the English. Yael, would you read it through in the Hebrew, then I'll read it through in the English, and then we'll go into the personal.
Sure.
Who has the personal?
Do you want me to put it on the screen?
Yeah, let's put it on the screen, and then let's just remind ourselves of Psalm 7.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. No, that was my fault for.
So
I think since we're starting this week.
Psalm 7, Hebrew and English. Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen or no?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, coming back. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right. My fault. While you're doing that, I wanted to just mention, we're not going to study it, but there we go.
Now?
Yes, there we are. Okay, so Yael will read the Hebrew, so we'll hear that beautiful Israeli Hebrew, and then I'll read the English, and then we'll look at our personal Psalms. Before we do that, while we're looking at it, I just wanted to let folks know a very interesting thing about this Psalm. Does anybody here know the name Jonathan Edwards? Probably if you went to Yale, you know Jonathan Edwards. I think there's a college named for him. Am I right,
Yes,
Harold?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Jonathan Edwards College.
Yeah, so Jonathan Edwards was probably one of the most famous American theologians, and he was part of something in American religious history, which is called the Great Awakening. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but really important in American religious history. And he gave one of the, what's considered, if you ever study sermons as a class, he gave a sermon which is considered one of the most famous sermons of all time. It's always given, it's always studied as one of the great sermons, great American sermons, great sermons of all time. But in this sermon, which is so famous, he has a reference to Psalm 7. And the very famous sermon he gave, hold on, I'm going to just get it. It's called Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. Now, we noticed in discussing Psalm 7 that it could be read always as either internal. And I think for me, that's how this Psalm really, really resonates. But for those who are into the fire and brimstone, God's presence, very much God punishing those who are evil. So sinners in the hands of a loving God. And listen to, I'm going to just read you this, which is from very famous verses. And I think it's, let's see which verse, just, why don't I do what, can we go down to what verse is it? It's going to be with the bow and arrow part. 13, verse 13. Let's go down to that and I'll read you this part. You know, when they gave sermons, then they really knew how to give sermons. It was like an hour and a half long. I yearn for those days, but I don't get to do that. Anyway, so I'm going to read you this part of this very, very famous sermon, this very, very famous part of Psalm 7. The bow of God's wrath is bent, and the arrow made ready on the string. Justice bends the arrow at your heart and strains the bow, and it is nothing but the mere pleasure of God, that of an angry God, without any promise or obligation at all, that keeps the arrow one moment from being made drunk with your blood. So his interpretation is very clearly that God could punish us, and God, it's all in God's hands. Anyway, all right, let's go back to the beginning and we'll read it. But just in case you're on Jewish Jeopardy and somebody says, I don't want to feel like I failed you by not letting you know this very famous thing about Psalm 7. Okay, Yael, you read the Hebrew and then I'll read the English and we'll go into this.
שיגיון לדוד אשר שר לאדוני על דברי חוש בן ימיני.
Shigayon, remember we have no idea what that word means. And Jeremy, I put up also in Facebook that great thing that Jeremy Lawrence discovered, which went around and around and around about what Shigayon could mean. And then it concludes, we have no idea. Shigayon, a Shigayon of David, which he sang to the Lord, capital L-O-R-D, Yud-He-Vav-He, concerning Cush, a Benjaminite.
אדוני אלוהי בך חסיתי, הושיעני מכל רודפי והצילני.
And notice how beautifully Yael reads to put that semicolon where the etnachta is. O Lord, Yud-He-Vav-He, my God, in you I seek refuge. Deliver me from all my pursuers and save me.
פן יטרוף כאריה נפשי, פורק ואין מציל.
Lest like a lion they tear me apart, rending in pieces, and no one save me.
אדוני אלוהי, אם עשיתי זאת, אם יש עוול בכפי,
O Lord, Yud-He-Vav-He, my God, if I have done such things, if my hands bear the guilt of wrongdoing,
אם גמלתי שולמי רע, ואכלצה צוררי ריקם.
and again, this is a very difficult verse to translate, as we've discussed. If I have dealt evil to my ally, I who rescued my foe without reward.
ירדוף אויב נפשי וישג וירמוס לארץ חיי, וכבודי לעפר ישכן סלע.
Then let the enemy pursue and overtake me. Let him trample my life to the ground, lay my body in the dust. Selah.
קומה אדוני, באפיך הנשא, בעברות צוררי, ואורה אלי משפט ציווית.
Rise, Yud-He-Vav-He, in your anger, assert yourself against the fury of my foes. Bestir yourself on my behalf. You have ordained judgment.
ועדת לאומים תסובבך, ועליה למרום שובה.
Let the assembly of peoples gather about you, with you enthroned above on high. Shuva, yeah.
אדוני ידין עמים, שופטני אדוני, כצדקי וכתומי עלי.
Yud-He-Vav-He judges people. Vindicate me, Yud-He-Vav-He, for the righteousness and blamelessness that are mine.
יגמור נרע רשעים ותכונן צדיק ובוחן ליבות וכליות אלוהים צדיק.
Let the evil of the wicked come to an end, but establish the righteous. He who probes the mind and conscience is God the righteous.
מגיני על אלוהים מושיע ישרי לב.
I look to God, Elohim, to shield me, the deliverer, the rescuer, the redeemer of the upright.
אלוהים שופט צדיק ואל זועם בכל יום.
God vindicates the righteous. God pronounces doom each day.
אם לא ישוב חרבו ילטוש, קשתו דרך ויכוננה.
If one does not turn back or repent, but whets his sword and bends his bow and aims it.
ולא הכין כלי מוות, חיציו לדולקים יפעל.
Then against himself he readies deadly weapons and makes his own arrows sharp.
הנה יחבל אבן, והרע עמל וילד שקר.
See, he hatches evil and conceives mischief and gives birth to fraud.
בור קרא ויחפרהו, ויפול בשחת יפעל.
He digs a pit and deepens it and will fall into the very trap he makes.
ישוב עמלו וראשו, ועל קודקדו חמסו ירד.
His mischief will recoil upon his own head. His lawlessness will come down upon his skull.
אודה אדוני כצדקו, ואזמרה שם אדוני עליון.
I will praise Yud-He-Vav-He for God's righteousness and sing a hymn to the name of Yud-He-Vav-He Most High. All right, I hope that reminded everybody of all the studying we did and all the questions about these words and phrases. And now, Yael, do you have the personal Psalms?
I do.
Okay. So I hope it feels a little different to look at it now after all those days of studying it. And
let me make this a bit bigger. Is this visible?
Yes.
All right, Jim, you're first.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, I ate for my song amidst the tohu vavohu. Terrified, I chased my own tail. Where is my confidence in you? Am I conning myself? I know you love me no matter what, but can I bear your love? Will you turn me or return me? If I scale the heights to seek you, will I survive your justice? My acts and intentions are broken. I need healing. Is that your gift? I will throw in with you and trust and sing.
Wonderful. Would you talk to us about it a little bit?
Yeah. For me,
Can you put it back on the screen, Yael? Would you mind? Sure. So we could see it while Jim's talking about it.
One of the things I was moved to do was to try and use puns to kind of echo what you were saying about the reuse of Hebrew words. That was definitely an inspiration there. It's personal. I don't feel the last little bit is yet part of my theology, that I'm not ready to throw in and trust, but maybe that's what I need to do. So I put it there as an aspiration. But the rest of it is all a question. You know, I'm still in tohu vavohu, and I just don't know. If you really love me, what does that love really mean?
So to explain tohu vavohu to folks.
It's the the welter and waste as Alter puts it, but it's that formless void before creation really takes place. Understood to be chaos or confusion or words that aren't nicely translated.
Very nice. I love this. Will you turn me or return me?
Yeah.
And again, you're very much using that language. And the I chase my own tail.
And I'm a Magid, so so that's a
Magid
very
meaning storyteller.
Yeah.
For people
So I am, there's a saying I'm fond of quoting from the Kalahari that you have to tell the story that's chasing you. So this to me is a turn on that as well.
Beautiful.
And
I also like the way that you've captured in the psalmist talking about the discussion we have that the psalmist isn't necessarily innocent. So my acts and intentions are broken. So that I found very powerful.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say is that the word bearing, even though I couldn't find a way to use it twice, it was definitely, am I bearing your love? Is your love bared to me? I mean, I wanted that in there somehow as well.
Like this, if I scale the heights to seek you, will I survive your justice?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. All right, there we go. We got some dog stuff. Penny liked your psalm very much, Jim. Okay, who's next? And I think we have some visual arts also, right?
We'll see if we can get it on, but in the meantime, we have Sherry. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Sherry.
Okay, I'm here. Cush, spelled incorrectly, sorry. Cush accuses after Psalm 7. If I did those things to you, dear friend, trample, pummel, smash my soul to dust. I could never do those things. You've forgotten my name by now. Like a lioness attacked, you rent me, then discarded the bones of our long love. I never did those things. You gnaw me still. You won't forgive what I never did. So who will judge? Who loom high to lift me from this pit? Pull out this shard from my heart.
This is it. Sorry.
Talk to us, Sherry. Wow. Let's go. Yeah. Tell us about Cush accuses. That's very powerful.
Cush, first of all, I thought it was odd that that this one individual would be singled out. And then as we discussed before, this idea of first introduced here, I'm sure it comes up later, but I'm new to this, that if I hurt an ally or a friend or someone on my side, then pummel me, then trample me to death, let the lion get my carcass, etc. But I'm innocent. This belief, I'm innocent. I didn't do that. And so following that arc, I tried to follow the arc, but just came to me. I have a dear childhood friend, or I had a dear childhood friend through my adulthood to a certain point. And so this resonated with me because this person is no longer my friend and I think of her every day. And I think that's the need for some sort of judgment, the need for someone to reach in because there is a pit. You try to get through things, but sometimes you can't. You really want this divinity to lift you up, pull you out, and it wasn't an arrow, but it's the shard that's left after the arrow is in. So that's where it came from.
I find that very moving, and I never did those things. You know me still. We all know those experiences of relationships which fell apart through no fault of ours. Sometimes there is fault and sometimes there isn't, and things are broken and don't all get fixed. And to pull this shard from my heart, that things remain in us even though we continue on in life. There are these shards that are left over from the various arrows which have gone in. They might not be visible, but they're still inside there. Very beautiful.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very beautiful. And discarded the bones of our long love. Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shall we go on?
And I think I'm just thinking about this whole thing about intentions and impact. We often talk about that. And we don't always know our impact, even when our intentions are good. And sometimes our intent, we just the gap between that and just the suffering we can go through. Very beautiful, Sherry. Yes, love this. And I bet you everybody in the class has an experience like this, feeling like, I'm not sure I did something so terrible, but wow, what a loss and what a shard that stays in my heart. Beautiful. Thank you, Sherry.
You're right.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
Dean.
All right, Dean, speak to us.
What I wanted to talk about, I guess, or share with you is if you can see there's an overarching uplift, which to me references back to how the Holy One is presented to Moses, both by fire at night and it's wind by day. So I wanted to take that upsweep for this whole community of human activity inside the presence that is standing is both, because the poem throughout it really reference Adonai, Yahad Rahe, the highest form of God. So that's part of it. I also wanted to reference back, because this is often in text, where you have the heel, like you have in, with the two brothers when he was born, grasping the heel and so on. So the lower left-hand corner, you can see where larger universe or cosmic is entering, is the whole that people are, it's really eating in. And so that's what's going to be swept away in terms of that. Our speaker, or as I've envisioned it as David, but as a speaker, he is in this kind of protected alcove. Here you can see him in the white, and that's part of this reflecting back on it. Yeah, that guy. He's always our designated. That's how I represent our designated speaker. And he always has his head. So in all these drawings, and they're fun to see, is that all of these are all the different kinds of ways human beings interact with each other. Sometimes fail, some fall into the pit. You could follow that in a close-up. But my speaker is always the unlit match. So that's consistent. I'm developing a language throughout all these drawings that follow the Psalms, so that hopefully at the end, if I ever show these in a gallery, I would love to have all the references.
Yes.
So
Dean, can I just ask a question, since it's hard to tell from the background and the material? Have you actually burned through the paper at certain points, or is that soot?
Yes.
So like
burned through.
So that's actually, the paper itself is burned through. Fantastic. And about how large is this? How large is this?
The overall piece, the wood panel is 24. It's 2 feet high and 3 feet wide.
Wow, so it's big.
And then the paper, well, that's small for me.
Okay.
It's not a mural. But the papers are 20 by, 21 by 30, 26 or 20, 30. So that, and then again, the copper nails is what's securing the paper. So the paper can move slightly or bend. So
so the copper nails, you have 3 on top and 3 on the bottom. Is that, and I see on the side too.
Right.
Wow. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
This is such a powerful series. And also, I just love the idea, because going back to Sherry's thing about intention and impact, that's the power of fire, right? You don't really control it. There's a level of uncontrolledness to it that's at center at the human experience.
Right.
Love it, Dean. I can't wait until we can display all of these. Can you imagine when we're in our building, we'll do a whole thing of art and of readings. It's just gonna be fantastic. Although folks, we are talking about doing an evening at some point, doing an event for the larger community where people can read some of your Psalms and Harold calls it a Psalm Slam. And show some of the art that's been created and music that's been written. Well, thank you so much, Dean.
Thank you.
Larry Finkelstein.
Okay. My parents named me Label and expected me to be who I wasn't. They saw me as broken and tried to fix me with a healer who tried to save me from what they saw as my wrongdoing. But all I learned was to keep silent and hide away my true self. In Israel, I was seen as a fraud. They knew, but offered me a name that wasn't mine. And then on my happiest day, I became Aryeh. With my new name, I was on the path toward honesty until my rabbi with a small r, with his judgment, took aim at my heart, which sought to extinguish my soul and toss me into the deepest pit of despair. With your help, O Lord, I no longer sought to repent and found the strength to fight off those arrows. You led me to my rabbi, with a capital R, and to my authentic self, with no fear of being exposed and judged as to who Aryeh was meant to be. I joined the pride.
Wow, Larry, what an incredible, just a just the riff on Aryeh and the pride of, and Aryeh meaning lion, of course. So tell us about writing this, Larry.
Well, that was it. I mean, Aryeh is me. I'm Aryeh, and so it spoke directly to me. When I was born, when I was born, I was given a Jewish name label, and that's what I thought my name was. I went to Israel in 1972, and then there was a jeweler in Jerusalem who was making silver rings with your name carved out, your Hebrew name carved out, and I went. I mean, everybody did that in those years. I went and I said my name was Label, and he said, sort of like, in my mind, like the soup Nazi. He said, there's no such name. And I said, what do you mean there's no such name? It's my name. He said, no such name. And instead of trying to figure it out, he said, I'll give you a name. And he gave me the name Labor, which he thought was close to Label. So I went home with that ring, and it lasted for a couple of years. And then at my son's bris, the Moyle said, you know, when we were naming Eric, he said, well, you know, you're giving him a Hebrew name, but your name is Yiddish. We really should give you a Hebrew name so you can be parallel. And he said your name would be Aryeh. So I became Aryeh. So that's the track of my name. Then comes the other track, which is when I was young, when I was in second grade, my parents recognized that, yeah, Larry's gay. But in the 1950s, it was an illness. So they brought me to a child psychologist who was going to fix me. But of course, all he did was reinforce the fact that I was broken and that there was something wrong with me. And all I learned to do was just to shut up about all this and not, you know, just keep it to myself. Fast, and so I did. I got married. I had a child and belonged to a temple in Queens. And in 1990, the rabbi gave a sermon on the high holidays condemning the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Jews, the reform body, who would then said that they would accept as a member any graduate of HUC.
Yeah, that was June of 1990. That was June of the end of June of 1990.
And so this was September or October of 1990, and he was incensed. He said there was no way that there should be gay rabbis, that our congregation should get out of the union, we should condemn it, and he was, you know, very, very vocal. People got up and walked out of the service during his sermon.
Wow.
And so there was a rift in the congregation. So the then president of the congregation decided we have to do something and formed a committee to look into the decision of the CCAR and what it meant for our congregation. And I was asked to be on the committee.
Wow.
So it was, I accepted, but, you know, I said, how did they know? You know, I mean, was this God speaking to everybody saying, you know, Larry has a deal here? But, you know, we went on, we decided after months and months of studying that we weren't going to do anything, and that, you know, if and when we ever needed to face the issue of a gay rabbi, we'll deal with it then. And I mean, and then sort of the postscript on that is the congregation, which no longer exists, its last rabbi was Rabbi Valerie Lieber, who is now at the Kane Street Synagogue, who is a lesbian.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's sort of, so that's like sort of the second circle. And then after this deal with my rabbi, I started doing a lot of introspection and a lot of figuring out who I was. And ultimately, I got divorced. I came out and I found my rabbi with a capital R. And
what a story. And can you believe, Larry, you're now writing poetry about it?
Absolutely not. When I wrote my first one, I thought that was going to be a one of. And then when this REA thing happened, it just poured out. So thank
Amazing.
you, Rabbi.
So beautiful. And come on, we have to make a point of the pride and the lion combination here. How beautiful, and what a wonderful layering of life and of language there. And honestly, I never made the connection between a pride of lions and gay pride. Like what a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful language connection.
Thank you.
What a story, Larry. Just thank you so much for sharing it. And thank you for being inspired by a psalm to put it into a poem. How fantastic is that? Beautiful.
Thanks.
I think we have time. Do we have time for one more, Yael?
Well, it's 10:36, so
maybe we shouldn't. Let's see if there are other comments. So let's save till tomorrow. So because I'm afraid of cutting somebody off. So anybody have any comments or responses to the ones we've seen today? I don't want Michael. So we'll start with you tomorrow. Okay, Michael Goldstein. You okay with that? Great. So I know people have been writing comments. Does anybody want to offer them? We can have a few responses to what we've read.
Dean, you commented on Larry, one artist to another. You wanted to talk about your reaction?
Well, I was just, Larry, thank you very much for the story. I just think you exemplified the courage that is, a subtext of Psalm 7. The speaker had courage, to share his inner fear, and I think you moved through all that just really beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Sarah Siegel, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Larry, thank you for talking about REA joining the Pride. That was great. I think it reminded me, I wanted to say my very favorite feature of the Bethune location. The night I discovered it, I was endlessly delighted and stared at it every time I would come there. By the Ark, the Aron HaKodesh, there were 2 female lions and 2 male lions. And I found that so charming once I realized it.
And we brought that to 30th Street. They are now, we brought some of the features that we could, as much as we could. They're above the door going into the sanctuary. It's a little less visible because they're higher up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have to, but if you look above the door from the lobby, when we were next there, from the lobby into the sanctuary, those lions, the 2 female and 2 male lions are above the door.
Whose idea was that? It was so fantastic. Do you recall?
I knew this story. Regina Linder probably remembers who did that way back when, because that predates me that was when Bethune Street was renovated. So I don't know if somebody in the class now remembers. Shep or Regina? But I can find out. There's definitely a story to it.
It's funny. People don't even notice it at first. You got to point it out. They're 2 male.
Okay, Shep, hold on. We've got some people with their hands up. Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Cantor Naomi Hirsch, you have your hand up.
Really quickly, I see that Devorah is waving wildly, and maybe she remembers about the lions.
Yeah, I can't see waving wildly. I can only see.
That's why you have an extra TA today.
So I'm just going to pop in here and say, Larry, I found, this is not a correction on how you spelled your name, but if I had to transliterate label from the Yiddish, I might write Leibel or Lay. There'd be different ways I would Ley. But the fact that you wrote Label, I don't know if that was intentional, but I thought that was fascinating because of the whole idea of your parents labeling you as needing help and as being deviant. And so it added a whole dimension of the psalm to me that you spelled it label. And
I agree. And by the way, to that issue, at CBST, we accept Yiddish names as our Jewish names. I know there was a period of time which was a kind of an anti-Eastern European, we got to all be, only Hebrew names would be accepted. But at CBST, you can get called to the Torah with a Yiddish name or a Hebrew name. We don't require a Hebrew name. Some of us were given Yiddish names by our parents. So that's okay. But I love but it just your name changes are such a great part of the story. Devorah, Do people know how to raise your hand in the participants thing? Is that where it is, or reactions? Is that where people do it? In participants. Because it's hard to see this. It's easier for Yael or whoever's serving as TA. If you go to where it says participants and raise your hand there.
It's not there. I looked.
Okay, Devorah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, two things. One, my father and Leonard Cohen were Labe Ariel, just like that. When I had to go to the funeral home, they said, what was my father's name? I said, Labe. They said, that's a Yiddish name. And that's when they told me that his Hebrew name is Ariel. But I want everyone to know that the Supreme Court just passed a rule that LGBT people that are fired can sue for bias. That just happened a few minutes ago.
Wow, great news. I'm looking forward to reading about it. That's fantastic. Okay, a couple of more comments.
I don't see any more hands
Okay.
raised, and it's 10:42. So
Okay, so I think, yeah, so Julia, will you sing us out?
Sure. And I love how the song, any chant at the beginning of a class may have a different feeling or meaning at the end of the class. And this phrase for me right now feels like I will sing praises to each of you for your creations and to all of us as being witnessing community together for this. It's amazing. Vazamra Shem Havaya Elyon 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 Vazamra Shem Havaya Elyon. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you to Kristen, and thank you to Yael and to Babette. And for those CBSC members, remember tonight, 6 o'clock, we have a town hall about school openings and what are the complexities about that. And wonderful news about the Supreme Court. And thank you, everybody. So Rabbi Rapport will be with the class tomorrow since I'll be in Queens getting to the cemetery. But for those who want to join the funeral via Zoom, we sent out those Zoom link in the notice, both for the funeral and for the Shiva Minyanim Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings. Okay, thank you, everybody.
We'll share that link in the chat.
Everyone, 5 o'clock tonight, Mishpacha dinner.
5 o'clock tonight, Mishpacha dinner. And this room will stay open for a few minutes for those who want to hang out and schmooze a little bit. And Rabbi Rapport will be on at 9:45 tomorrow and be with all of you tomorrow.